Hey, I'm Dean, 26. I work at a local auto shop in Ridgeway, a small town where everyone either knows your name or your parents. Been working there since I was 19. Grease under my nails, country rock on the radio, and not much to talk about besides engines, brake pads, and customer complaints. But there's this bar 2 blocks down from the shop, Larkin Ember, small place, wood bar, low lighting, blues playing every night. I started going there mostly out of habit. One beer after work, then two, then it turned into something else entirely. She was behind the bar the first time I walked in. Vanessa. I remember thinking she didn't look like the kind of woman you'd expect to be pouring drinks at on a Tuesday. She was composed, confident, hair tied back, lipstick that always matched her shirt, and this way of listening to people like she already knew what they were going to say. I didn't know how old she was at first. Could have been late 30s, maybe more. I didn't care. She looked better than any girl my age. I mean that. There was something in the way she moved, like she'd been through it all and wasn't impressed by much anymore. I liked that. At first, I just sat quietly, nodded, ordered the usual, but I started throwing in comments. Not cheesy pickup lines, just real stuff. "You always pick the music," I asked one night. She nodded. "It's good. Never heard someone mix Clapton with Aretha Franklin." She gave a tight smile. "That's the point." That's how it was, one-liner small talk. I was just another customer. She treated me the same way she treated the guy in a suit or the guy in overalls. Still, I came back again and again. Left bigger tips, wore my better t-shirts, sometimes even cologne. She never noticed or pretended not to. One Friday, I got off late, covered in oil, exhausted, but I still went straight to the bar, sat at my usual seat. She glanced over. "Rough day?" she asked. I shrugged. "Better now." That night, I waited, watched the crowd come and go. Finally, near closing time, I saw her wiping down the bar. And I just said it, you know. I started nervous as hell. "You make 42 look like a damn privilege." She froze for half a second, just enough to let me know I hit something. Then she looked up, and for once her smile wasn't tight. It was real, almost like it caught her off guard. She leaned slightly closer and asked, "Who told you I'm 42? I smirked. "Nobody, just a good guess." She laughed, and it wasn't one of those forced chuckles. It was deep surprise, like it hadn't come out in a while. "Well," she said, placing a napkin in front of me, "that's probably the nicest thing I've heard all year." I nodded, heart-pounding fingers tapping on my beer. I didn't expect much. Maybe just that she'd remember me next time. But then she said something I wasn't ready for. "Wait for me after shift." I blinked. "Wait, what?" She raised an eyebrow. "You heard me." I waited outside, cold air, stars barely visible through the town lights. I paced. Checked my phone. She finally came out, coat slung over her arm, hair down for the first time. She looked nothing like the woman behind the bar. She looked softer, tired, but lighter. "You sure about this?" I asked. She looked at me for a long second, then said, "I didn't ask you to take me home. Just walk." So we walked. No plan, just blocks of conversation. She asked me what I did. I told her about the shop, about the time a customer drove in with his bumper dragging behind. She laughed again. And that was it, that laugh. The reason I kept showing up, because for a minute she didn't look 42. She didn't look guarded, she looked alive. At the corner she stopped, looked up at the old brick hotel that's mostly used by truckers and people passing through. She glanced back at me. "He won't care," she said almost to herself. I didn't know who she meant. I didn't ask, I just followed her inside. She booked a room. No questions asked. No hesitation. Just slid her card, took the key, and walked to the stairs. We didn't talk much once we got in. She sat on the edge of the bed, kicked off her shoes, and looked at me like she was trying to decide something. Finally, she said, "Don't get used to this." I nodded. Not trying to. But that night wasn't about sex. We lay there. She told me about her old job, about how she wanted to open a coffee shop once, about how she used to dance not professionally, just for fun in her room with the music blasting when no one was home. It was quiet, safe, real. By sunrise, I knew something had changed. I didn't know how deep it would go. The next morning, I didn't go straight to work. I sat in my truck for a while outside the motel, just staring through the windshield. I wasn't trying to figure out what had happened. I knew exactly what had happened. We didn't sleep together, but something real had sparked between us. Something that felt like it could get complicated real fast. I kept replaying her voice in my head. Don't get used to this. Like it was a warning I wasn't supposed to ignore. At work, I was off my game. Dropped a socket wrench. Misaligned a brake pad. My boss, Tommy, gave me a look like I'd lost it. Late night? He asked. I just shrugged. Something like that. I didn't see Vanessa the next 2 nights. Didn't go to the bar either. I told myself to play it cool. She probably regretted it. Maybe she thought it was a mistake. I didn't want to push. But by the third night, I couldn't sit at home anymore. I needed to see her again, even if it was just behind the bar, pretending like nothing happened. I showed up just before closing. The bar was quieter than usual. A few couples, 2 guys playing darts, and her standing at the far end drying glasses. She noticed me right away. No smile this time, just a look, one of those long, unreadable stares. I sat down in my usual seat. She slowly walked over. You disappear, she asked, voice low. I cleared my throat. Didn't want to make it weird. She raised an eyebrow. It's already weird. That hung between us for a second. Then she leaned on the bar and whispered, you free after I close up? I nodded. An hour later, we were walking again, but this time there was a different energy. No small talk, no nervous laughs, just silence and city sounds. We turned off Main Street and cut through a park I never go to at night. When we hit the riverfront, she finally stopped, sat on one of those old metal benches. I sat next to her. She lit a cigarette, the first time I'd ever seen her smoke. I don't even like these anymore, she said, exhaling. But they give me something to do with my hands. You okay? I asked. She took another drag, then said without looking at me. I used to think I was in love with my husband, Blake. We got married when I was 23, first real relationship. He was funny, smart, made me feel wanted. She paused. Then he started working late, smiling less, touching me less. You know the type. I stayed quiet, let her talk. I caught him once, text on his phone, some girl from work. I confronted him. He said it was nothing, that I was imagining things. Gaslit me so well I believed him. Another drag. Last night I found out he's been sleeping with my best friend Rachel, someone I've known since I was a teenager. Her voice cracked on the last sentence. She flicked the cigarette into the river, leaned forward, hands clasped between her knees. I didn't tell you that so you'd feel sorry for me. I just needed someone to know, someone who doesn't owe Blake anything. I looked at her. She still hadn't cried. Her jaw was clenched, holding back everything. I didn't say anything smart, didn't tell her it would be okay. I just reached over and put my hand on hers. And that's when she looked at me, really looked. You know, she said softly, most guys my age don't make me feel like this. I blinked. Like what? Safe, like I can breathe. I swallowed hard. Then keep breathing. She laughed once short, surprised, then slowly she leaned in and kissed me. It wasn't rushed, wasn't desperate. It was honest. We stood up, didn't say much, and just walked. This time she didn't take us to the motel. She took us somewhere different, an old antique shop. She said her friend owned, closed for renovations. She had the key, said she was watching the place while they were out of town. Inside, the lights were soft, warm. The room smelled like old books and worn leather. There was a vintage couch in the back. She pulled me down beside her. We didn't do much, just sat her head on my shoulder, our fingers intertwined. I don't know what this is, she said. I nodded. Me neither, but I don't want to stop it yet. Then don't. And we didn't. That night we talked about music, food, places she dreamed of visiting. She told me she always wanted to live by the ocean, but stayed because of Blake's job. I told her I never left town because I was scared of starting over. We fell asleep on that couch, her wrapped in my hoodie, my arm draped over her waist. In the morning, we left through the back so no one would see. As she was locking the door, she looked back at me and said, whatever this is, Dean, let's just keep it simple. Simple, I asked. She smiled, sad and tired. No promises, no pressure, just now. And in that moment, I was okay with that. The next week felt like a blur. Every day I worked like usual, oil changes, brake jobs, worn tires, but my mind was always somewhere else, or rather with someone else, Vanessa. We didn't talk it every day, but when we did, it felt like I had known her for years. She wasn't just some fling or a fantasy. She was her own universe, why I couldn't stop orbiting. Sometimes she'd text me late at night short messages like, still awake or needed a laugh, got one. Other times she'd just send a song, an old soul track or some obscure indie band from the 90s, and I'd listen to it on repeat, picturing her walking around her apartment, barefoot, glass of wine in hand. We met up 3 times that week. Quiet places, her friend's antique shop, again, my truck parked out past the old train yard. One night, a small roadside motel on the edge of town where no one knew either of us. And every time it was easy, no pressure, no labels, just two people who didn't want the world in their space. But something was off. I felt it in her voice and her eyes. She was present with me, but the second we separated, it was like she sank under again, like she was gasping for air. That Saturday, I was at work when my phone buzzed. A message from her, can you meet me not at the usual spot? She sent a pin in an empty lot behind an old hardware store. 15 minutes later, I pulled in. She was already waiting in her car, engine running, radio off. I walked up to her window. She didn't get out. Get in, she said. I slid into the passenger seat. She didn't look at me. He came home last night, she started. Your husband, I asked. She nodded. He looked me in the eye and told me nothing ever happened, that Rachel made it up. I waited, and for half a second, she said, I believed him again. Her hands were trembling. I reached over, gently placed mine on hers. Vanessa, he's lying. Of course he's lying. But you know what's worse? She finally looked at me. I let him lie for years. I let him convince me I was crazy, that I was cold, that I imagined things. There was rage in her eyes, but beneath it, grief, a kind of heartbreak that had nothing to do with betrayal and everything to do with how long she let herself be erased. She leaned back in her seat, eyes closed, like she was trying not to fall apart. I didn't know what to say. I just sat with her, let the silence fill the space. He left again this morning, she said after a while. Didn't say where, didn't say when he'd be back. Are you safe? I asked. She nodded. He's never hit me, Dean, but sometimes I wish he had. Would have been easier to leave. I swallowed hard. That line sat heavy in my chest. She turned to me suddenly, face inches away. Do you think I'm weak? No, I said without hesitation. I think you're surviving. She studied me. I saw the wall she kept around herself flicker for a second. Then she said it again, but softer this time. Most guys my age don't make me feel like this. I looked into her eyes. Like what? She smiled barely. Like I'm still worth something. I leaned in, kissed her forehead, and whispered, you are. She finally exhaled, long and slow. We sat in her car for over an hour. Talking, not talking, watching the sun dip behind the buildings like it didn't want to shine on us anymore. Later that night, she came over to my place for the first time. It wasn't anything special, a one-bedroom above a garage, mismatched furniture, tools everywhere. I was embarrassed. She wasn't. This feels more like home than my house ever has, she said, kicking off her heels. She made tea while I cleaned off the couch. We sat on the floor, backs against the wall, drinking from mismatched mugs. At one point, I looked over and found her staring at a photo on the bookshelf, me and my dad fishing. I was maybe 10. He looks proud, she said. He was, I said, until he left. Her head turned slowly. Left, I nodded. Mom raised me alone. He just disappeared. She didn't ask for details, just reached for my hand. That night, we didn't undress each other like in the movies. We took our time, undressing slowly, carefully, like people who knew what it meant to be touched for the right reasons and the wrong ones. And in that moment, everything felt real, like we weren't pretending. She stayed until sunrise, curled into me, her hand resting over my chest. Can I stay just a little longer? She whispered at one point. As long as you want, I said. When she finally left, she didn't say goodbye. Just kissed my jaw and walked out the door, barefoot, heels in hand. I stood there for a while after, shirtless, heart pounding, half hoping she'd turn around. She didn't, but I knew she'd be back. After that night, something between us changed, but not in the dramatic movie scene kind of way. It was a subtle, softer, quieter. We didn't talk about what we were or what this meant or where it was going. We just kept going, Vanessa started coming over more often, never with a bag, never staying more than a night, but she'd show up in her coat hair, down no makeup. Sometimes she'd bring takeout. Other times she'd cook in my tiny kitchen, barefoot humming to herself while the sauce simmered. I never told her, but I lived for those nights. We developed a rhythm. She'd text me late always after her shift, and I'd open the door before she even knocked. We didn't do anything loud or reckless. We'd sit on the floor, drink cheap wine, play music from my old Bluetooth speaker. She liked vinyl, but I didn't own a record player. One night she brought over a stack of old records anyway, said they made her feel grounded. We didn't post, didn't follow each other on social media. In a town like ours, one tagged photo could ruin everything. She didn't want Blake to know. I didn't ask why. I already understood. She wasn't hiding me because she was ashamed. She was hiding me because I was hers and hers alone. Once she invited me to drive with her out of town just for a night. We ended up in a beach motel 2 hours away, off-season empty parking lot, wind howling through the palms. It was the first time I saw her really laugh without holding anything back. She ran along the sand shoes and hand hair, blowing like she was 17 again. I chased after her, soaked and smiling like an idiot. We ended up under an old pier wrapped in towel salt on her skin. That night in the motel, she told me stories from her 20s about a backpacking trip she never took. A guy she almost married before Blake. A poem she once wrote and hid under a floorboard in her childhood bedroom. I told her things too, about how I almost went to trade school in Ohio, how I once spent a summer fixing up an old motorcycle I never finished. Oh, how I hated the smell of the shop, but loved the satisfaction of a clean engine. She lay with her head on my chest, fingers drawing shapes on my ribs. "You're too good at this," she whispered. "At what?" "At making me feel alive." I wanted to say, "You make me feel the same," but the words stuck in my throat. I wasn't ready for where that would take us. When we got back to town, things picked up pace. She started coming over almost every other night. Sometimes for 2 hours, sometimes until dawn, but always with that same rule: no expectations. We never talked about love, never used the word, but it was in the way she'd leave her earrings on my nightstand, the way I started stocking the fridge with the tea she liked, the way she started wearing one of my hoodies without asking. One night, we were in my truck, parked behind her bar after closing. She was tired, makeup smudged, voice hoarse from yelling over music all night. I reached over, brushed her hair behind her ear, and she said almost to herself, "You know what scares me?" "What?" "I could get used to this." I looked at her. "Would that be so bad?" "Yes," she said, "because people like me don't get endings that don't hurt." We sat in silence for a minute. "I wish you weren't married," I said quietly. She flinched, not because it was mean, but because it was true. "So do I," she whispered. That night we went back to the antique shop. She had a spare key, said the owners wouldn't mind. We lit candles, played soft jazz from an old speaker in the corner, lay on a vintage rug in the back. She moved like she was learning how to be wanted again, not used, not tolerated, wanted. Afterward, as we lay tangled in each other, she stared up at the ceiling and said, "I think I used to be someone else." "What do you mean, before Blake?" "Before the years that took everything. I used to dance, right, dream?" "You still can." She looked at me. "Dean, you see someone in me that I forgot existed." I didn't answer, just held her tighter, but deep down I was starting to feel the edge of something, like this was all leading somewhere. Good or bad, I didn't know, but it was moving faster than either of us planned. A week later, she didn't show up. No text, no call, just silence. Then the next morning, a message: "I need time to think, I'll be okay." I stared at the screen for a long time, didn't reply. I didn't go to the bar that night or the next. Instead, I sat in my truck outside the antique shop, headlights off, engine running, wondering if she'd appear like a ghost from the shadows. She didn't. And for the first time in weeks, the silence felt heavy. I didn't know if it was over. I only knew I wasn't ready for it to be. It had been 9 days since Vanessa's last message. 9 days since I heard her voice, felt her presence, touched her hand. I checked my phone every morning. Nothing. I didn't go to the bar, didn't drive past the antique shop. I just worked, ate, slept badly, and waited. I told myself not to text her to give her space, but the silence wasn't peaceful. It was sharp, full of unspoken things. I started thinking maybe I crossed some line, maybe she regretted everything, maybe Blake found out, maybe she left without telling me. Then late on a Wednesday night, I came home from work to find an envelope taped to my door. No name, just my address scribbled on the front in blue ink I recognized. Inside was a note folded once. Dean, I didn't disappear. I needed to sit still, think, breathe. I didn't want to say anything until I knew for sure. I'm leaving. I filed for divorce. I'm moving in with my sister for a while. She has a spare room 2 hours away. I thought about saying goodbye in person, but I know myself. I wouldn't have left. What we had was something I'll never be able to explain to anyone. But I want you to know it mattered. You made me feel like I wasn't fading. Thank you for every night, every moment, every time you saw me when I couldn't see myself. I hope you keep fixing engines and hearts. Yours V. I read it once, then again, then again. The rest of the night, I just sat on the couch, the letter folded in my hands, the room dark. No music, no noise. I kept hoping she'd text, call knock. She didn't. 2 days later, I walked into Larkin Ember for the first time in weeks. Someone else was behind the bar, a younger girl. Blonde fake nails, loud laugh. No, Vanessa. I sat at my old spot, ordered a soda. The bartender asked if I knew where the lady who used to work here went. I just shook my head. That night, I drove nowhere in particular, just long back roads, windows down, her playlist playing on my speaker. Otis Redding, The Cranberries. Some indie acoustic track I still couldn't pronounce. I stopped at a diner out on Route 7 and ate alone the way I used to before all of this started. Then I drove to the antique shop, parked across the street, lights off, empty. I got out, walked to the door, looked inside. Everything was where it had been. The dusty furniture, the record she left in the corner, the rug we once lay on like kids hiding from the world. And there, taped on the inside of the glass, was a Polaroid photo. It was us. She must have taken it during one of those late nights, probably using that old instant camera she once joked about. I was smiling, arm around her shoulder. She was leaning into me, eyes closed, like she belonged there. Underneath, written in her handwriting, "Most guys my age don't make me feel like this." I stood there a long time. Later that night, I went home, pulled out my old duffel bag, and found her earrings still sitting in the front pocket. The ones she always forgot, the ones I never reminded her about. I didn't cry. I just lay back in bed, stared at the ceiling, and let the quiet come over me. But it wasn't the same kind of quiet as before. It didn't hurt the same. It felt like peace. I didn't hear from her again. I didn't expect to, but I held on to her letter. I kept that Polaroid. And sometimes when work is slow and the shop radio plays something soft, I think about her, about that winter. We didn't plan, about how two mismatched lives found each other for just long enough to matter. She didn't promise me forever. She gave me something rare, a reminder that sometimes the right connection comes at the wrong time and still changes everything. And me, I stayed in Ridgeway, fixed engines, took walks by the river, started sleeping a little better, drinking a little less. But every time I hear Otis Redding, I look up and smile, because for a little while I reminded someone they were still alive. And she did the same for me. Vanessa and Dean's story offers a poignant lesson about the transformative power of being truly seen. Life can grind us down, leaving us feeling invisible, as Vanessa did in a marriage that eroded her sense of self. Yet in Dean's simple, honest presence, she rediscovered her worth, her dreams, and her capacity to feel alive. This teaches us that the right connection, even if fleeting, can reignite our spark. It's not about grand promises or forever. It's about moments of genuine care that remind us we're not fading. Dean, too, found purpose in making someone else feel valued, showing that giving without expectation can heal both hearts involved. Their story urges us to be present, to listen deeply, and to offer kindness to those who might be silently struggling. It's a reminder that life's most profound impacts often come from quiet, unguarded moments. Moments that don't demand labels but carry infinite weight. We all have the power to be someone's safe space to help them breathe again, and in doing so, find our own light. What moved you about Vanessa and Dean's story? Have you ever had a moment where someone made you feel truly seen? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. If this resonated, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell to join our journey of heartfelt stories. Let's keep discovering what makes life beautiful together.